Amelia had always been known as a composed and accomplished woman. At 38, she was the founder and CEO of a prominent cybersecurity company. From a girl who used to stay up all night learning how to code in a cramped dorm room, Amelia had gradually built her own empire. She now owned hundreds of millions in assets and appeared to live a flawless personal life, a well-respected lawyer husband, a sleek modern home, and glowing family photos on magazine covers. To outsiders, Amelia had it all. But behind the closed doors of her luxurious mansion, a creeping emptiness had begun to settle into her life. She started to feel watched, as if an unseen pair of eyes followed her every move. Private conversations in her office suddenly felt unsafe, and her computer would occasionally show strange alerts, as if someone had accessed it without her knowledge. At first, Amelia convinced herself she was being paranoid. "I'm probably just overworked," she whispered, brushing off the unease. Ryan, her husband, still seemed as affectionate as ever. He brought home flowers, arranged candlelit dinners, and frequently posted happy photos of them online. But that in itself felt too polished, too controlled, like a curtain hiding a stage. One day she called Ryan from her office and didn't realize he had left his phone on record. In those few accidental seconds, she heard another man's voice talking with Ryan, not about work, but about how to verify asset ownership before divorce. Amelia froze. Her heart skipped a beat. She didn't react immediately. She knew that a wise woman never acts in anger, only with clarity. That evening, she sat alone in her study, staring at the wedding photo that had stood on her desk for 6 years. The image of the two of them holding hands in a garden of white flowers now appeared blurry, not because the photo had aged, but because her eyes were filled with tears. From that moment on, something inside Amelia shifted. She was no longer just the woman focused on running a company or keeping up appearances of a perfect marriage. Instead, she became a quiet observer. She stopped sharing personal details with Ryan, minimized unnecessary interactions, and began documenting every suspicious behavior, from the late-night meetings that didn't match his calendar to mysteriously deleted emails from their shared devices. Amelia knew her sense of being watched wasn't paranoia. She contacted a cybersecurity expert, a former FBI agent, and asked for a full inspection of their home network. The findings were chilling. Her computer had been infected with remote spyware, and a hidden camera in her office was triggered automatically whenever she entered. This wasn't just surveillance, it was a deliberate hunt. Ryan, the man who once vowed to shield her from the storms of life, had become the one secretly building a detailed divorce dossier. He was no longer the man from their wedding day, but a calculated opponent. He knew the law, knew how to cloak wrongdoing in legality, and most importantly, he knew she had everything to lose. But Ryan made one crucial mistake. He underestimated the woman Amelia had become. She didn't confront him. Instead, she spent sleepless nights reading about asset protection, offshore corporate structures, and marital laws across states. She hired a separate legal team disconnected from any of Ryan's networks and began quietly restructuring her financial holdings. She sold off minor equity stakes to her company's Singapore branch and moved her intellectual property rights under a pre-marriage legal entity. Everything was above board, documented, traceable, but carefully disguised, so no one could easily detect the shift. While Ryan continued playing the role of the loving husband, Amelia silently and with precision became a strategist in defense. And amidst candlelit dinners and smiling Instagram posts, a quiet war was unfolding. One side laid traps. The other feigned innocence. And Amelia knew when the time was right, she would strike from a position of strength. It was a quiet weekday afternoon when Amelia entered her home office with a cup of tea in hand. sunlight streamed softly through the tall glass windows, casting golden streaks on the hardwood floor. But the moment she opened her laptop, a notification appeared. Your device was just logged into from an unknown location. This time she didn't panic. Calmly, she typed a few lines of code, traced the login activity, confirmed the IP address, and saved the full system log. In her mind, the puzzle pieces had started to connect into a larger map. It was no longer suspicion. It was clear evidence Ryan was trying to take everything. He wasn't just collecting data. He was building a calculated case to prove Amelia shouldn't retain her assets in a divorce. From spyware to hidden cameras, secret recordings, to based on intercepted wireless scanner logs, even using a third party to pose as a private investigator. This was no longer a personal betrayal. It was a strategic assault bordering on financial crime. Amelia remained silent. While Ryan continued playing the doting husband, setting the dinner table, cooking meals, even planning a romantic getaway, she knew it was all a facade to mask his meetings with lawyers, hidden paperwork, and preparation for a cold, calculated lawsuit. One evening, while Ryan claimed to be meeting a client, Amelia decided to check the safe in her private study, a place where she had kept contracts and key documents since the early days of her startup. But the safe's code had been changed. Her chest tightened. Not because of the documents, but because she had just been completely violated. Amelia didn't cry. She sat down and recorded every detail in a confidential file. She now knew she wasn't just a wife. She was an asset to be exploited. And when the person lying beside you at night turns out to be the one quietly dismantling everything you built, pain transforms into absolute clarity. In the days that followed, Amelia lived a double existence. By day, she remained the confident tech entrepreneur, smiling in meetings. By night, she became a quiet investigator, gathering evidence against the man who shared her bed. She didn't sleep deeply. Every time the door clicked open or Ryan's footsteps echoed down the dim hallway, she held her breath. Not out of fear, but because she was watching. She hired a private attorney demanding absolute discretion. This lawyer wasn't from the tech world, but had deep expertise in divorce law, asset shielding, and how to handle cases involving unauthorized data surveillance. In private sessions, Amelia laid out her evidence, screenshots of spyware software, IP access logs, recordings from the hidden cameras, and a clipped audio file of Ryan speaking to a man about how to move assets without leaving a trail. The attorney looked at her silently, then finally said, "You have the grounds for a counterattack." But Amelia wasn't focused solely on winning. What she truly wanted was to exit, first protect herself and her empire before Ryan could tighten the legal noose. If he filed first, he could frame the narrative and gain early advantage. So she changed everything. No more shared banking access. Ryan's credentials were removed from all internal systems. Copyrights and patents were transferred to an offshore subsidiary. She even bought out a major investor through a silent third party, someone Ryan didn't know was on her side. All the while, Ryan continued performing the perfect husband act. But every smile, every "I love you," he whispered, felt like the knock of a traitor, one who still believed she was blind to his betrayal. But she wasn't blind. She was waiting. The mask had fallen. Love was gone. And the man before her was no longer a husband. He was a rival in a tailored suit, headed toward a courtroom not for reconciliation but for war. And in that war, it wouldn't be love or pity that won. It would be strategy. Amelia knew that if Ryan acted first, the entire battleground would shift in his favor. As a divorce attorney specializing in complex asset division, Ryan didn't just know how to present in court, he knew how to exploit every loophole to win. And Amelia understood more than anyone that intelligence wasn't about reacting, it was about moving first. She convened a confidential meeting with her legal and financial team. Everyone in the room had signed airtight non-disclosure agreements. On the large screen before them was the map of Amelia's empire, the parent company international branches, intellectual property investment portfolios, and personal trusts. Every line, every dollar was the result of over a decade of relentless effort. Amelia wasn't trying to be greedy. She simply knew Ryan didn't deserve a single piece of it. He had never contributed to the company. Even when Amelia spent sleepless nights fixing back-end crashes or pitching to investors, Ryan was golfing, attending parties, or going on vague business trips. Now he wanted to stand in court wearing the mask of a noble husband and claim his fair share. Amelia began strategic repositioning. First, she established a holding company in Singapore, a country known for its strong legal protections for private wealth and clear distinctions between pre- and post-marital assets. All software copyrights, trademarks, and key contracts were legally transferred to this new entity with full documentation audits and legal transparency. Next, she leveraged a personal trust fund she had created before marriage, moving part of her shares into the name of a different beneficiary, her niece, whom she had long supported through school. In doing this, Amelia not only shielded a large part of her estate, but ensured it no longer fell within any divisible marital assets. Every move was backed by documents notarized and authenticated internationally. Yet Ryan remained in the dark. He still believed everything was sitting in place, waiting for him to strike at the perfect moment. Meanwhile, Amelia smiled quietly. She had cleared the board before her opponent even made his first move. Amelia's next move wasn't just about protection, it was about redirecting the entire flow of power. She began working with a major international bank, setting up multi-layered financial accounts where access wasn't directly under her name, but controlled by an advisory trust board. Every transaction required multi-step verification and was tied strictly to premarital assets, placing them outside the reach of divorce claims. At the same time, Amelia discreetly began removing those close to Ryan from sensitive positions within her company. Managers he had recommended in the past were either rotated out or quietly phased from internal decision-making chains. Everything happened smoothly without drama. But layer by layer, Ryan's influence was being peeled away like stripping the bark from a tree without disturbing the leaves. A critical point was the co-ownership clause. In a moment of misplaced generosity, Amelia had once listed Ryan as a secondary brand trustee for a side project app under the company, a symbolic gesture to strengthen the marriage. Now she reached out to a foreign partner and initiated a merger of that app back into the parent company, rewriting the entire ownership structure. It wasn't just legal cleanup. It was defusing a bomb before it could detonate. Throughout the process, Amelia remained composed. On social media, she still appeared with Ryan, at a few events still smiled tenderly, still tagged him in posts that seemed loving and warm. But inside, she was rewriting the entire script for the war that was coming. She didn't flee, she didn't beg, she didn't lash out. Instead, she moved 3 steps ahead, held her ground, and waited for the enemy to strike first. On the final night before Ryan planned to submit his divorce petition, Amelia sat in her office staring at the financial map she had redrawn, line by line, asset by asset. Everything was in place. And in the quiet darkness of the home she once believed to be her sanctuary, she smiled. Not because she had won, but because she had refused to be a victim. That morning, Amelia rose early. The sky was a pale gray, hinting at rain, but her mind was clearer than ever. She knew today was the day Ryan would officially file for divorce. She had waited for it not to fall apart, but to strike back. Ryan left the house early, dressed in a crisp suit and wearing a cold, confident smile. He believed he was entering a game where he held all the power. What he didn't know was that every piece he intended to play had already been silently removed from the board. As soon as Ryan left, Amelia logged into her private command system. With one click, she activated the strategic dominoes she'd lined up for months. Her financial advisors filed the final asset transfers in Singapore. Her legal team submitted a counter-petition to the court before Ryan's could be officially recorded. A full suite of financial disclosures was released, confirming her premarital ownership and placing all core assets outside the scope of division. By that afternoon, Ryan received a call from his attorney. It wasn't congratulations, it was a warning. Amelia had beaten him to it, and not only that, she had struck back. In the counter lawsuit, Amelia attached evidence that Ryan had illegally surveilled her during their marriage, hidden cameras, spyware, unauthorized audio recordings. This wasn't just unethical, it was criminal. Ryan was stunned. He had believed himself to be the clever predator holding all the information, manipulating the flow. But what he hadn't realized was that for months now, he had been caught in a counterintelligence trap designed by Amelia, the very woman he once dismissed as fragile. Every move he made, every message he sent, every secret meeting he had with lawyers, Amelia had mirrored and monitored through a combination of airtight legal strategy and high-level cybersecurity. That was the moment Ryan began to realize he wasn't the only one who knew how to play the law, and this time, the law wasn't on his side. Ryan staggered when he realized his entire scheme had unraveled. He called Amelia that same night, his voice sharp but shaken. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. But Amelia didn't raise her voice. She simply replied calm, "And even I protected what was mine. And you underestimated me." The call ended, and that was the last time Amelia heard even a trace of dominance in Ryan's voice. He knew now the war he thought would be swift and clean was slipping out of his control. In the weeks that followed, Ryan's legal team tried to negotiate, but Amelia wasn't in a rush. She remained composed, letting the law speak for her. She allowed the media to glimpse the truth, not to broadcast her pain, but to highlight the moral and legal boundaries violated in what had seemed like a perfect marriage. She didn't position herself as a victim. She didn't post tearful statements, didn't retaliate with gossip or expose their private life. Instead, Amelia let evidence, the law, and her quiet resolve speak for her. Eventually, the hearing took place under a heavy cloud. Ryan arrived with 2 attorneys trying to keep a composed face, but his eyes kept drifting toward Amelia, not with disdain this time, but with fear. Amelia sat tall, expressionless, flanked by her legal counsel and a thick stack of documents. When the court questioned the allegations of privacy violations, her attorney laid out the evidence, each instance, each time-stamped breach, meticulously documented. In the end, Amelia didn't need to win with words. She won with truth. The court dismissed most of Ryan's claims. Her major assets were declared separate outside the bounds of marital division. Worse for Ryan, he was now under investigation for personal data breaches and violations of spousal privacy laws. It wasn't a victory of vengeance. It was a restoration of power in silence, with precision and beyond denial. After the trial, Amelia didn't celebrate. There was no champagne, no triumphant statement. She simply returned home, a house that was no longer a battlefield, though not yet a sanctuary. It was just a quiet space heavy with memories and silence. Amelia had spent most of her adult life building things: a company, a marriage, an image. Now all of that had either been dismantled or needed to be rebuilt. But this time she wasn't building for admiration or to prove anything. She was rebuilding for herself. In the early days after the divorce, Amelia didn't rush back into business. She gave her body and mind the gift of time, sleeping full nights, eating properly, walking in the early morning sun. She reconnected with old friends, people she had unconsciously pushed away in the name of career and marriage. One afternoon, in a quiet conversation with her closest friend, she heard herself say something she hadn't admitted in years. "I've lived too long in a life that wasn't mine anymore." That sentence opened a door, not a door back to the past, but a path toward freedom. Amelia began rewriting her daily rhythms. No more crammed schedules. She prioritized meditation reading and relearning forgotten joys, drawing, cooking, yoga. She also began therapy not because she had broken down, but because she wanted to heal consciously, not let pain sleep and later rise without warning. Gradually, she found peace in the simplest things: a cup of hot tea at sunrise, an afternoon with no meetings, a quiet night with warm lights and instrumental music. She once believed strength meant being tough, being unshakable. But now she understood true strength is allowing softness without breaking. It's facing solitude without losing yourself. Once her emotions settled and the mental wounds began to heal, Amelia returned to work not as a revenue-driven CEO, but as a guide. She redefined the company culture focused on sustainable growth and created a safe space for women in leadership and innovation. One of her first major decisions was to launch a fund called Women Who Won't Break. It was designed to offer legal and financial support for women trapped in financially abusive marriages or business relationships. This fund wasn't just a mission statement, it was a personal vow from someone who had walked through fire and found the way out. Amelia didn't tell her story in interviews. She didn't need to. Those who needed to understand saw it through how she lived, how she led, and how she gave back. And those who once doubted her like Ryan were now shadows in her rearview mirror, no longer capable of shaking her foundation. One golden afternoon, sitting in her sunlit office, Amelia wrote a line in her journal: "It's not silence because I'm weak. It's silence because I no longer need to scream." From someone betrayed, surveilled, and reduced to a soft target, she had become a boundary setter, not through vengeance, not through weapons, but through stillness, strength, and a healed spirit. Amelia's new life wasn't always filled with joy. There were still lonely nights, exhausting days, and quiet moments when fragments of the past would flash back. But unlike before, she no longer feared those feelings, because now they didn't control her anymore. Amelia had stood up without needing anyone, but now she was someone others could lean on. If there was one thing Amelia took away from everything she had endured, it was this: never underestimate a woman when she goes silent. Amelia's silence had never been surrender. It was observation. It was space to plan. It was the pause that protected her from reacting emotionally when the pain was at its peak. Throughout Ryan's calculated attempt at a legal ambush, she never raised her voice. But every move she made, from restructuring her estate to counter litigation to preserving her dignity, was sharp, deliberate, and flawlessly executed. Now that the storm had passed, Amelia still held on to that principle. She didn't try to become a feminist spokesperson or brand herself as a survivor. She simply lived according to what she had always believed: real strength doesn't have to announce itself. It shows in how we choose to respond. At a corporate leadership event, a journalist once asked her, "If you could say one thing to your past self during the betrayal, what would it be?" She smiled, paused a moment, then replied, "Thank you for not screaming, for standing still long enough to see everything for what it was." The entire room fell into a thoughtful silence. In a time where outrage is common, where people broadcast every injury and rush to react impulsively, Amelia's calm restraint was a quiet rebellion against the chaos. Not everyone understood that. Some had called her cold, calculating, even too distant. But the truth was, Amelia chose the harder path: silent self-reliance, no begging, no pity, no noisy revenge. And because of that, she didn't just keep her fortune, she kept her integrity, her values, and the quiet wholeness of her soul. Years later, Amelia's name still appeared on lists of powerful entrepreneurs. But what made her most proud wasn't her net worth, her awards, or million-dollar deals. What gave her the deepest satisfaction was that she didn't let betrayal turn her into someone bitter. Amelia never targeted Ryan after the courtroom. No cryptic posts, no retaliatory moves, even though she had every reason and every resource to do so. She understood something rare. Revenge through success is powerful, but revenge through peace is even more devastating. Her silence wasn't cowardice. It was a choice, a way of holding on to humanity in a world where most choose outrage, violence, or victimhood to deal with pain. In one of her few interviews, she once said, "I don't need the world to understand me. I just need to not betray myself." And she lived by that, by never using pain to cause pain. In the end, what makes a woman truly invincible isn't that she's hard, powerful, or wealthy. It's that she's lost everything and learned how to rise without anyone else. Amelia wasn't a symbol of vengeance. She was a symbol of sovereignty. A reminder that once a woman no longer needs to prove herself, that's when she becomes truly free.